This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, this is Eric Jorgensen with slide number 2, Get Yourself on Track, from the original 10 slides I did. So we're going to roll right into this and work on what the things that we should be doing are. Getting yourself on track. We're going to talk about what type of life do you want, what goals besides retirement do you have, and we're going to get clear on what needs versus wants versus wishes are. Needs are food, shelter, things you can't do without. Wants are some of the wants may be needs as well, but for example, depending where you live, you might have to have a car. You may not have public transportation, but you don't need you don't need a $60,000-$70,000 car. Maybe you can get by with a $25,000-$30,000 car instead, or something similar. And then the wishes: what are some things that you dream of having, but maybe not in the cards right this second? So the first thing, let's talk about before you even start thinking about needs, wants, and wishes, we've got to wonder, where does your money go? And understanding where your money is going is going to help you understand how you're spending. So if you're spending on needs, that's going to be talking about what is your groceries, what's your food bill, the groceries, clothing, how much are you spending on clothing, healthcare, debt payments may be a need just to get you out of debt to keep you safe, right? Housing. So these are examples of the needs that I was discussing earlier. And for some of these, there are options for how not to spend so much. For example, for groceries, maybe you shop at Aldi or a discount grocery store. They have less options, but typically they're less expensive. If you need certain foods because of dietary restrictions, or perhaps you're on an all organic diet, then you know you're going to be spending more in this column. And because we all have a finite amount of money, we all have the same limitations. The numbers may be higher depending on who you are, but we are all limited by how much we're bringing in. If you're going to be spending more here in groceries, then you might need to be spending less up here in housing or transportation. That's up to you. As planners, we're not here to tell you you shouldn't be doing something. We're here to help you understand, if you spend more here in groceries, then somewhere else is going to have to take a hit. And it's up to you to decide what that priority is. When we're done with this slideshow, I'm going to show you a couple tools we use with our clients. Do a more this spending plan is something we give all of our clients. Not a big fan of budgets, but we found it helps people understand where their money is going. And we also have a mortgage calculator that I'm going to get into a little more detail. So that's your need. You're talking about, I know I need to buy food because we have to eat. I know we need shelter. Doesn't mean we're owning a house. Perhaps we're renting. And again, this is for you, not your child. Right now, we're focusing on what can we do for you. Now, maybe you have more children, so you need more bedrooms. Well, that means you may be spending more here, and groceries you may have to be, maybe you don't have the luxury of eating all organic or buying all brand names. Or maybe you're like I am and you're not a foodie. I'm certainly not a foodie. For me, food is energy. So my grocery bill is typically, for my son and I, less than $100 a week. I buy a lot of store brand stuff. I don't, even the stuff that's not store brand, I'm not buying very expensive. I've also opted not to spend a lot in housing because I want to fill more of my wants. I want a housekeeper. I want a yard person so I don't have to do my own yard work. So I have opted to keep what I spend on needs very low, and I'm spending more on my wants. So those wants are, again, I have a housekeeper who comes twice a month. I have a guy that comes out to do the yard twice a month. Um, I I've opted not to do a lot for cable TV because I don't see a lot of value in cable TV. Entertainment for me is a fairly low cost. For some others, it may be a higher cost. So that could be entertainment, could be things going to the movies. It could be maybe you like to play golf. It could be anything that you do to get you away from work, even if it's in the house. Say you're scrapbooking, that could be entertainment. What are you spending on? What are you spending to do your scrapbooking? You know, in some ways, owning a dog or a cat or another pet could be a want instead of a need. A need could be a service animal, and if it is a service animal, as we'll get into when we talk about taxes, you can claim some of those expenses on your taxes. But if you're just owning the pet for companionship or what have you, that's a want. And not to be too cavalier about it, but sometimes you may have to opt out of owning a pet because it's just too expensive. At least in the beginning. The objective is, again, not to tell you what you should or shouldn't be spending money on, but helping you make those decisions between, I really would like to do more vacations, or I would like to spend more time with my significant other going and doing things, but I never seem to have the money. Well, if that's the case, is there anything else in here that you can give up? Or do you need to look at making more money? If you can, right? I mean, that's the difference between a want and a need. And then the wishes are, hey, I'd really like to, for my 50th birthday, I'd really like to fly to Europe, or something that's a big reach for you, something that you would not ordinarily do, but it would really be impactful if you could do at least one thing before you die. That would be how I characterize a wish. So this is a great tool. I believe you may be able to click on it and download it. If not, this is something that we work with all of our clients. We give them one. It's something you can probably build yourself. It's certainly not difficult if you want to pause the video and create an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet using these categories. It's certainly not that difficult to do. But it really, and if you don't want to do it yourself, you have apps like mint.com or other apps where they'll tell you where your money's going, and they'll help you really decide how do you want to spend. You need a budget. It's YNAB, YNAB is a great app. It's not free, but it's based on a digital version of the envelope system, where you have money earmarked for certain things every month or every week. And then as you spend it, once it's gone, it's gone. And then it's another way of prioritizing what are my needs, my wants, and my wishes. And then in the need category, saving or setting money aside for saving should always be one of those needs. Be it for retirement, be it for goals, whatever else, you always want to pay yourself first. Now, when we were talking about housing, which is a need, I wanted to make sure people understood mortgage companies will often tell you that you can afford more house than I and many other advisors and planners are comfortable with people purchasing. This is a calculator we built and we share with people that we want to make sure people understand the house isn't necessarily what the mortgage company is telling you can afford is not necessarily what you should be purchasing. I copied this from Main Street Financial. They did a great job building this out. It's a tool that you can create yourself in Excel, or you can use Excel, you can use Google Sheets. The objective is to not spend more than 30% of your income on housing. And that comes from that comes from a federal guideline for HUD. So you have the house purchase price, you have the down payment, you have mortgage to finance, you have the number of months you're financing, you have your interest rate. So that gives you your principal interest, right? A lot of mortgage companies, when they tell you what your payment's going to be, this is what they're looking at, principal and interest. It's up to you to figure out your taxes and insurance. So I don't know where you live, but you can Google this. Utilities, you're gonna often, if you're renting, you're probably not gonna, you may not be paying for utilities yet. That's another cost you're gonna have to factor in. Maintenance, you wanna make sure that you plan to spend something on maintenance every month. I use 1% of purchase price. There are other estimates out there, but you should plan on spending something, even if you don't do it every year. Owning a house requires constant upkeep. How much upkeep depends on the age of the house, but you can plan on spending something. If you live it somewhere with an HOA, you're going to have to factor that in. So all of that comes down to what your annual cost of housing is. So the objective is to make sure that you're not spending more than 30%. So in this case, if you're buying a house for $400,000, the income you're going to need is at least $123,000 a year. This isn't an exact science, it's a ballpark, right? It's all going to change based on how much you can put on a down payment. Going back to the previous slide, how much you're willing to give up in some of these other buckets. If you want a more expensive house, you're going to have to look at spending less somewhere else. Maybe you don't get a car payment, things like that. So this is another tool to consider using and factoring in and thinking about when you're getting ready to purchase a house. So I told you everybody should be setting money aside for themselves. That the savings bucket should be a bucket that everybody has under their needs. And you're saving for a couple different reasons. First and foremost is you're saving for emergencies. The money that goes into this emergency fund, you're going to want to put into a high yield savings account like Ally, or so I use Marcus by Goldman Sachs. I also use Marcus by Goldman Sachs is the biggest one I use. I've used other ones in the past. You can go to bankrate.com and find high yield savings accounts. You're looking for something that's paying more than 1.5% interest. If you're using some of the big banks like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citibank, etc., they're probably only paying 0.01, 0.02% on your savings. You're not getting anything. And because this is an emergency fund, so you should not be getting it, you should not be using it. You want that money to just grow and grow untapped for as long as possible. How much do you want in here? You're going to want 3 to 6 months. My rule of thumb is if you're a single income household, you're going to want 6 months of expenses. If you're a dual income household and both of you have a pretty stable job, then you're going to want 3 months of expenses in the emergency fund. The logic there being, if one of you loses a job, the other will still maintain some income coming in, and you may only have to tap into the emergency fund for half as much as you would if both of you lost a job. And in a perfect world, you'll be able to find other employment in 3 to 6 months, or you'll be collecting unemployment and you won't have to tap into your emergency fund as quickly. I also have goals on here as a place to save. So how much should you be setting into any of these? I'd like to see at least $25 a week or a month into emergency fund, something that you can consistently put away. Something is better than nothing. If all you can afford to do is put $10 a month into it, then do that. The concern, the problem, the issue is if you don't have any money in there, then when something does come up, and if things come up, it's going to happen, you're going to put it all on a credit card, or you're going to find yourself in a hole. if you at least have something in that bucket and you really identify it just for emergencies, even if it's $100 because you did $10 a month for 10 months, that's $100 more than you would have had. That could be a week's worth of groceries that you wouldn't otherwise have. So don't stress as much about, oh, I can't, how much can I put in? And don't say, well, I can't put a meaningful amount. I can't put in $100 a month or $200 a month. I'm just not going to do anything. Start with what you can. And if that means you're doing $10 a month, then do $10 a month. And then just commit to, maybe you have a really good week and you have more than you were expecting, and you put a little extra in that week. Commit to doing that, and then saving and saving and saving. Goals should be the next thing that you're thinking about. You don't have to do this if you don't have an emergency fund. You should not be doing it if you don't have an emergency fund. You don't have to do it at the same time. If you're saving into your emergency fund, you don't have to set money aside for goals right away. I found that it works best this way. So out of all this, let's say I'm working with somebody and they say, well, I can set aside 15% of my income, and my employer will match my retirement savings up to 5%. So great, let's put 5% in retirement, get that full employer match. So now you're getting 10% in retirement, 5% that you're putting in, 5% your employer is doing. Let's set aside 5% for goals. So you're feeling like you're rewarding yourself for saving this money, and you have a concrete goal, a concrete target. You know why you're saving that money. Sometimes if all you do is put money into the emergency fund, it can be hard to stay motivated because that money doesn't feel like it's doing anything for you. So let's say your goal is, I want a new car in 5 years. And so you're putting money aside into that account every month. Well, you can label that as a new Toyota or whatever that goal is. Label that bank account, give it a nickname, and then every time you look at it, you can see it growing, and you're rewarding yourself and you're reminding yourself why you're saving. Like I said, it can be harder to do that with an emergency fund. So let's say you make, I don't know, $2,000 a month is what you're bringing home. So if we're going to set aside 15%, right, that would be $300 a month. So you'd put 100, 100, and 100. And then if you're getting a match, that'd be 200, right? And the cool thing is, with most of these retirements, you're not seeing this come out of your check because it comes out before it hits your bank account. With these two, you're going to have to automate it or go in and transfer the money every month, which is why I recommend automating it, because it doesn't necessarily automatically come out of your paycheck. It may have to hit your bank account, and then you have to do something. Retirement, they're going to take it out before it hits your bank account. Don't worry about the numbers, as I said. Just make sure you do something. And finally, don't feel like you're never going to be able to do whatever it is you want to do. With a caveat, if your dream is a hot air balloon around Europe, maybe you can't do that. But if you have some other lower key wishes, maybe it is, hey, eventually I want my child to be independent, and I want to have them living independently, and I want to downsize and move into a cottage or something, or I want to take a vacation every year when I retire, or maybe it's just simply my wish is I want to stop working at some point. Hold on to that. With planning, there are things that you can accomplish. There are, with regards to providing for your child, there are resources out there. That's why Planning Across the Spectrum was founded, was to help families find these resources. If you sacrifice now and you set aside the money, saving like we're talking about, and you have the emergency fund and you have your goals and you have your retirement funding, then it's going to be easier to talk to you about, well, this is what you need to do. here's what you can think about doing. And it's really hard talking about this in the abstract like this over a webinar or virtually like I'm doing, because everybody has such different goals. So for myself, just for myself, for what I want to do, my vision for myself is that I will stop working probably 70 or older because I really love what I do. But when my son transitions out of school in the next couple of years, I would like my vision, my plan is to buy myself an RV, move into the RV, let my son keep the house I'm in right now, and travel around the country with the objective of as it gets cold, I drive south, and as it gets warm, I move north, and just never have another winter. Doesn't mean I'm never going to see my son. Doesn't mean I'm not gonna provide for him. That's my, in this category, that's my dream. Is I want to live out of an RV and travel. I might do it for a couple months and say, wow, this really sucks, and never go back to it. But that is what I'm working towards. I have my emergency fund funded. I'm still setting money aside every month for my goal. I'm not putting money towards as much as I could be towards retirement, because I'm less worried about my retirement, given the fact I have my pension, my VA disability, and when I retire, I'll get Social Security. But that's my plan. Each of you who's watching this should have your own plan, and think about beyond the day-to-day of I just need to survive. I just need to survive. Because the longer you keep your head down and grind, the more difficult it's going to be to achieve future goals, to feel that you really deserve or you really can accomplish the things you want to accomplish, because the numbers that you're going to need are going to seem so astronomically high. There's never a time when it's too late. It's just the later you start, the more difficult it's going to be. It's like anything else, overcoming inertia. So rather than have analysis paralysis or just feeling overwhelmed, which is easier said than done, work with us or work with somebody to get you started. It doesn't have to be a big number. Something is better than nothing. I promise you, as you get into it, it will become easier. You start small so it doesn't hurt as much. If you start too big, you're less likely to continue doing it because it's going to be very difficult. So start small, give yourself permission to start small. And just like you do with your child, set benchmarks, and as you reach and surpass those benchmarks, celebrate the wins. They don't all have to be huge wins. It could be, hey, you've reached the $500 in the account. I've never had that before. That's awesome. Celebrate it. And it could be, I've never had an emergency fund before. Now I have one, and there's money in it. That's awesome. Celebrate it. Just be realistic. So that's all I have for this one. Again, the best way to connect with me is email, or email is the best way. You can try the 800 number. That'll be answered in the office. And I hope this has been useful. I'll continue doing these, and we'll see how things go.